Welcome back to Gene and Roger Talk Movies. Gene is
I'm
back
back. I'm
after
back.
his 1 week of.
I was
what
on
were you
vacation.
doing? Oh, vacation.
I was on
Okay.
vacation.
Very
Family
good.
reunion. It's not too far. We were just in Girdwood, but it was cool.
All right. Well, that's nice. Of course, friend of the show, Scott Eggleston, is back with us today, and it's actually his movie choice this week is the Rule of Jenny Penn, currently playing on Shudder and every other streaming platform.
Yes.
It's a brand new movie. Of course, here's your spoiler warning, because Gene and Roger Talk Movies, we just freely discuss everything. But let's get right in. Gene, where are you at with the Rule of Jenny Penn?
Roger, I was about to praise you vigorously because I thought this was your pick for a movie. And I was like, usually your picks in movies are just terrible.
Incredibly great.
They're terrible. Like that Island of Dr. Moreau we watched the other week. And oh my gosh. And then there's that Santa Claus movie. It's just, they're abominations.
They are great. We'll get you there, Gene.
And you
we'll
made
get you
me
there.
watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. And yeah. I don't know if I'll get over that actually. But actually, this movie's great. I love this movie. It's what's horror's all about. So it's good. It's great psychological stuff. Yeah, it's horror's got that elements in it. I mean, it's not bloody, like some of the slasher movies, but it's not that. It's not that subgenre of horror. So it works for what it does, and I like it. It also has some great little life lessons in it, And so, yeah, this movie's great. Everyone should watch it. It's good stuff.
Okay, well, you don't hear that too often from Gene
about a Roger-inspired movie, but actually with Scott.
Yeah. Scott, where are you at with this one?
I liked this movie. I thought it was a solid psychological horror film. It also branches off into an interesting subgenre I'd never really thought of before, which is geriatric horror, which I guess we've seen before in movies like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Yeah, I knew you would bring that up.
type of movies. And as we were kind of talking about before, probably not a huge draw to watch this movie for the general populace.
No,
but it's a solid movie regardless.
Solid.
I mean, it's an effective, disturbing, at times pretty terrifying. I was kind of wondering like how far are they going to go, with this movie. And my mother, living in a convalescence home right now, kind of added a little extra.
There you go.
A little extra, close to home there. Even though I'm not afraid that my mother's going to be, accosted or murdered by another.
Or they keep the gates locked.
Yes, they do. But one thing I really enjoyed about this movie were those two lead performances. Oh my gosh, just spectacular. John Lithgow, who's always great anyway, but I mean, in horror movies, have to have a good villain, right? And he delivers in this movie.
He's a great villain.
For sure. Geoffrey Rush is a great protagonist. I like the fact that he's kind of this pompous judge, obviously a flawed character, so he's not perfect. He's not, a white knight or anything. I mean, he's got lots of issues. And it's just a pretty solid story. I do have some complaints we can talk about, but definitely worth watching.
Right. The general premise of this film is Geoffrey Rush plays this.
Wait. What's your take on
I
it?
will get to that, Gene.
Okay. All right.
Synopses are good.
Yeah. He's a judge, and he actually experiences a stroke, a debilitating stroke, and so he ends up in a wheelchair in this convalescence home. And
nursing home. Yeah.
Apparently, John Lithgow is not quite clear what his deal is, but he enjoys tormenting all of the other residents of this convalescence home. And so that's your dynamic there going on in this film. And I do like the fact that you talked about the protagonist being a really good one. I agree. But the other thing I like about, they've put him in a wheelchair, right? And so he's even more vulnerable because he's in a wheelchair. He's got paralyzed kind of on the left side of his body.
And Lithgow's not. He's completely mobile.
He's totally mobile. He's even, there's some scenes where he's dancing around and running at one point. Right. And so it's a really creepy, interesting dynamic there between those two, as well as John Lithgow's ability to have complete control of that entire convalescence home. I do like this movie quite a bit. There is a significant kind of, you have to suspend disbelief at a certain point. But I enjoyed this movie a lot. But Scott, let's get into what you didn't like about it.
Oh, what I didn't right away? Okay. Probably my biggest there's a couple of things. My biggest complaint is probably the way the security is sort of shown in this movie is laughable.
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, the first time you see Lithgow kind of subvert the security, that's believable. But then they just kind of say,
at the elevator.
Yes. Yeah. Then the movie basically forces you to assume that that's what he does every time, and so he can completely roam free in this place after hours, and that's pretty ridiculous.
Well, my thought was because there's this whole sequence where he kind of sets up Geoffrey Rush as like this thief to kind of get everyone off the fact that John Lithgow is actually the main problem here. Mm-hmm. I would assume, and maybe I'm just an idiot, which possibly I am, but I would assume there would have been hallway cameras.
Right.
And so at any point, if somebody is saying, hey, this creepy dude went into my room, it would be just a matter of going, and let's look at the camera footage, right? Oh, there he is going right in. The movie's over right there.
Well, and in the elevator shot that Gene was talking about, it is shown like a reflection of like a parabolic mirror, which typically there's cameras behind those, so you assume that's the scenario.
Yeah, it just seems to me, because this is not like a convalescence home that is on hard times, because at one point she says, hey, we're full, we can't move you to another room, we're completely full, they're all paying customers, so you maybe could have gone around like, well, it's kind of a decaying, kind of hard on their luck kind of convalescence home, and okay, maybe that would explain why there's no cameras or anything, because the stuff that John Lithgow gets away with simply could not happen.
It just wouldn't happen on any circumstance anywhere.
Well, how about a sensor on the fence when somebody opens it in the middle of the night? Trip an alarm or something?
Well, and I did like how they did secure that after that happened with the big chain.
The chain with the padlock, yeah. Although it brings up the point, you have to think, I mean, was he really ever there? Like a John Lithgow character is people, they're at their end of life, and so this movie brings up like you always have to be fighting for your life and for fighting for what's good. If you fall into despair and you risk just losing it, and your life becomes meaningless if you're just looking at the negative side all the time. And so even if you're old and even a convalescent home, you still have to fight. Fight for the goodness in life. You have to go towards the light, to use maybe a dumb phrase. And those guys at the end, they gain freedom. The Minori character, and then
Maori.
Yeah, thank you. And
so it's set in
Geoffrey Rush,
New Zealand.
New Zealand, yeah.
Maybe their security's worse there.
Apparently.
So they only gained freedom, was when they decide to go together against this character. And so, I don't know, is he really there? Because if he's not really there, it kind of explains the lack of security, because the security kind of like
the movie
Charlie Brown.
The movie doesn't hint at that at all, if that's true.
Yeah, it's for the movie to work, you kind of, I think, have to go there, because elsewhere the movie just doesn't work, because under no circumstance could he just roam the hallways at night, terrorizing people. Really loud and is loud at night, and there's just no way.
Yeah, John Lithgow is definitely there, but you just have to accept the fact that for whatever reason the security is really lapsed. And what I was trying to go down the road with that, though, is because there's a sequence where Geoffrey Rush is kind of going down a hallway in his wheelchair, and he sees all these photos over the years of the staff there.
Right.
And so it shows that at one point back in 1968, John Lithgow was staff, and he appeared to be staff all the way up until about 2012. Something occurred to cause him to have to be in the convalescence home, right? Yeah. Some sort of psychotic break for sure. And so I was hoping that there would be kind of a reveal at the end that he was controlling the entirety of this hospital, which would explain then why no one was ever intervening. His control power was so immense that even the headmaster of the place was kind of under his control and was just allowing this to be his personal playground of torture and humiliation of the old people, but they didn't go down that road.
No, there was. In fact, the person in charge kind of disappears from the movie. Like she's a kind of a prominent role for about 2/3, and then she just vanishes.
Then she disappears, right?
Which is a screenplay issue, like some of the other things we're talking about. Probably maybe could do with a rewrite or something to help with that.
Yeah, I got to go back to that. He wasn't really there. I
don't know, man. That's reaching. I think that's reaching.
I don't think so, because I think there's just some scenes where the staff interacts with him, but it's really flighty.
Everybody interacts with
really
him.
Yeah.
I would say if that were true, he wouldn't be stealing people's food, and they wouldn't be acknowledging him if he were invisible or not there. Even though I guess you could blanket it under, well, everybody's got dementia, so maybe they don't know. But which this movie actually has some interesting, how it shows dementia is pretty interesting.
But I kind of like the whole idea is that they're all in a convalescent home. They all know that the end is near. They're all going to die soon. And I think it's a place that's built for despair, because and Geoffrey Rush in the movie, he brings up at this point is that, did I lead my life to end up here? What did I do to end up here? I thought I'd have grandchildren and they would be surrounding me, but no, I'm here. And so everyone has to think that I'm in this place. And so I think having a demon that's everyone experiencing is a commonality that would be possible in a place like that, where you're stuck and it's like, how did I end up here?
Yeah, Lithgow talks about you're a prisoner. You're going to be a prisoner in your own body. And...
Right. So in a metaphorical way, I know it's Reach. I know, but I kind of like you brought this up on previous reviews. Is that you as a movie maker, you don't really reveal everything to the audience, and so I think this movie does that. They pose that big question and they just don't reveal it.
Well, I think his motives are definitely hidden, which that didn't bother me, because especially in a horror movie, a lot of terrifying villains have been in horror movies that you don't know what their motives are, i.e. Michael Myers in the first Halloween. You don't really know what's going on. It's a mystery. And I think a lot of that is true with the Lithgow character, even though he does get a monologue at one point talking about how he saw the judge, and that kind of inspired. Yeah. Although I'm not quite sure how that plays in completely, because he was inspired by the judge, but now he's, I guess, ruling over the judge, so he feels maybe that's his reward. He feels alive. I think you use that phrase. Obviously he's on a power trip, obviously. Yeah. And in a place like that, we haven't even talked about Jenny Penn, the little doll character he goes around tormenting everyone with, which is a very effective tormentation device. I don't know. And cinematically too, they do a lot of interesting things with that doll.
Yes.
Making it really big at certain points. The expression changes. Yep. Sometimes I notice in one shot when Geoffrey Rush is in his room, Lithgow's room, he opens the drawer and it's got eyes for like a frame.
Yes, I'm glad you caught that.
And he looks again and they're gone. Stuff like that I love that kind of stuff. It's all just messing with the viewer and plays into the themes and everything.
But, I also think there's a great sadness playing over this film, just looking at the old people, and this is how a lot of our elderly citizens end up. There's a great character who keeps waiting for her children to come pick her up. And she keeps saying, we're just getting through Christmas, and then they're going to come get me. And Geoffrey Rush at one point looks at her and goes, you realize it's October right now. And then another character, I think it was Lithgow, says, you've been here for like 7 years or something like that. No one's coming to pick you up. Right. And kind of this disposable elderly that we've kind of created in our society, where we're perfectly fine just putting mom and dad in one of these places and never talking to them again, right? Someone else's problem, you take care of them, and that's kind of then. So there's kind of this overriding sadness, because they're doing weird things in there, like having the wacky guy come in and play the little music and all this stuff.
That mask he was wearing?
Right, to try to entertain these elderly people. But you look at somebody like Geoffrey Rush. I was a judge. I was important. I mattered. And now I'm completely forgotten about, shoved away in this place. And that's a negative commentary for sure on our society right now, where that's perfectly acceptable to do that.
There's also an interesting visual motif that kind of reinforces what you're talking about. I noticed a lot of the framing, they put the people on the bottom of the frame. You notice that a lot of, almost like they're at the end, right? They're at the bottom. This is it. They're just barely there. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, especially the sequence where the two security people are grabbing Geoffrey Rush after he clocked Lithgow. That you see 80% of that frame is the ceiling.
Right. So like negative space on the top.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting way it was filmed for sure.
Yeah.
In New Zealand, they got a nice vacation for 2 months there. Well, that was,
exactly.
But it's the other thing I want to point out about this. What were your thoughts on the cat?
I was expecting the cat to die a horrible death.
No.
I kept thinking the cat was going to get killed, right?
No. So I would recommend, if you ever go back and watch it again, look at that cat very closely. Every time that cat appears, somebody dies.
Oh.
And there's also a great scene where the people in the convalescence home know that cat, when the cat shows up, somebody's going to die, because there's a great scene where there's one guy, there's 3 chairs, the 2 on the sides are occupied, the one in the middle is not. The cat jumps up there. Both of those people get out of there. They leave.
Spirit of death, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly. He's Grim this Reaper. Harbinger of death. And even at the end, when John Lithgow dies, that cat's right there. He walks by, and then Lithgow's walking into that area. The guy who lights himself on fire, who's right there? The cat's there. The guy on the floor that Lithgow just shuts the door on, the cat's right there.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
And then, but the thing about it is, if you go down that road with the cat, which I obviously did because I love cats.
We all love cats.
The last scene of the movie with an actor in it is the cat looking at Geoffrey Rush.
He's next.
Nice.
Yeah,
he's next.
So Geoffrey Rush time.
That's cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So
I'm not going to watch it again.
It's worth a second view.
But thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I thought it was really neat how they did that, and because I watched it twice and I caught it on the second time. I was like, wait, every time the cat shows up, the next scene.
I do have a confession: is that it's been a busy week for me. I only watched this movie actually this morning. We should shoot it.
I watched it a second time this morning. So I don't blame you.
Yeah. But well worth your time for sure.
Oh, for sure. It's good. It's good. Horror should make you uncomfortable, and this movie definitely does that.
Well, and I think it operates as uncomfortable on a bunch of levels, right?
Right.
I mean, I think the younger you are, potentially the more uncomfortable you're going to be with this, because the entire cast is elderly, 70 plus years old, except for some of the caretaker people there, and kind of some of the stuff they have to go through just as you're aging. I think Geoffrey Rush basically coming into that convalescence home saying, all I got to do is get stronger and I can leave, I can walk out of here, only to realize that he's not getting better and he's not ever going to get out of there, and all he's doing is going to end up dying there.
Yep.
Unloved and forgotten, because nobody ever visits him there. He's there a good long time in this movie, and no one visits him.
Only occasionally do I see actually visitors there. You do sometimes, but... Yeah.
Well, and are they visitors that are directly related to the people, or are they just volunteers because they're doing like arts and crafts and things like that?
At the end, you see, which is a more happier time, I think. There does seem to be family members there, but I agree that it doesn't appear Geoffrey Rush has family,
right?
Or they don't like him, which is very possible, considering how he's painted in this movie.
Pretty abrasive character. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And the other thing I want to talk about just very briefly, there is a great sequence in this movie where John Lithgow allows one of the characters to just wander off the property. And they have these key cards, and they're all labeled, and they work specifically for each room, right? So John Lithgow's key card works for the John Lithgow room. The person's key card that gets out has a key card also to get into her room. I don't know, Scott, have you watched a lot of Italian giallo movies?
A few.
Okay. Did that sequence where Lithgow realizes he's got the wrong card and then has to run back outside to where that girl is,
find that
with
woman,
that kind of 70s era music going on, I immediately was flashing back to just about every Italian giallo movie I've ever seen.
Really?
I just was like, this whole scene, the way it was shot, the realization that he's maybe going to get caught for real now. And then just the panic that he has, and then, of course, having to fight with the fact that he's got some pretty significant asthma problems and things. I was just like, oh, wow, I'm back in like some 1978 Dario Argento movie or something like that. I just thought it was and I would love to know if the filmmaker was maybe a big fan of those types of movies, because this does kind of have the feel of one of those types of movies.
Interesting. I didn't get that impression, but I'm sure I have not seen as many. I think I've seen Suspiria. It's probably about it. But that was a great scene. Another scene I really liked was the inhaler scene, which is kind of one of my complaints about this movie. Is that scene is so good where Geoffrey Rush kind of pulls one over on Lithgow. And then how they dispatch him at the end is kind of an anticlimax, I felt. I realized the message is, they had to work together, to defeat him, and that's great and all, but that other scene is so much better and so much more satisfying to watch him get his comeuppance, that I kind of wish they were almost inverted.
And I didn't like that. Right, it's that John Lithgow seems like he dies, but then
Well, somebody,
he's gone,
the second time I watched it, like I wondered, well, what happened? How did he recover? But the second time I noticed there's an attendant walking in the background. It's only there for like half a second. So that's to imply that they rescued him.
Yeah, for sure. But I did like the way that scene played out with the asthma thing, because I think, yes, the ending appears or may feel anticlimactic, but I think part of that was Geoffrey Rush was the only person in that whole place that wasn't just cowering under his thing, right? He was fighting back, and he was doing everything he could to try to rally other people to his side. And so I think it fits with what they're trying to accomplish there. With that ending, which was, you've got to stand up for yourself and take care of business. Of course, apparently you can easily get away with murder at this convalescence home because it happens more than once in this film.
And that lady that you said that he opens the door for her and then she wanders off, she's up like in the middle of the night doing her thing. Like, where's the staff, to get her back to bed?
No, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of that where you have to kind of suspend disbelief and just go with the flow of this movie, because none of this would happen in a real convalescent home on any level.
Maybe she was not real also.
You'd maybe
have... Give me a break. She's real.
You'd maybe have somebody like her walk out of her room and immediately be recognized because there's cameras and there's people that are more, and so... but this movie, the acting is so good. The cinematography is great.
Yes.
How the story plays out is really solid. I can, as you guys know, I forgive a lot of things in the movies I watch, and certainly it's not something that ruins the film.
No, definitely.
Yeah, it works.
And there's a lot of split diopter shots. I don't know if you're familiar with those or not in this movie.
Enlighten us.
There's a split diopter is where you have a lens that has two focal lengths in it, so you can have things that are close to the camera in focus as well as things far away. So if you see a shot, Brian De Palma loved these, and this is a Lithgow movie, so maybe there's.
So what about in the center? Is that out of focus?
It's blurry. Yes, it's blurry. So usually they'll try and hide it with some kind of line, like a doorway or something is typically. But you'll notice, that it's soft. There's several shots in this movie where he's got one of them. He has the doll Jenny Pin, and he's moving it around, and it's going out of focus because the lens. There's actually two lenses with a hard line in the middle that are put together, but
so he's in
it's
focus.
A cool shot. It's a cool thing in movies, and
So you're saying he's in focus, then he's out of focus, and then he's in focus again.
There's both sides of the frame. There's things that are far away are in focus, and things that are near are in focus, which is impossible unless it's super wide. But then everything's distorted. So if you want things that are more realistic looking and not so distorted by a wide angle lens, then you'll use split diopter, which is just a lens with it's two lenses put together in the same casing. So anyway, I'm noticing things as a filmmaker like that. I also really like the scene where I think Geoffrey Rush blacks out and he wakes up and there's like a flashing on his face, and he wakes up and it's the floor going past him. He's looking at the floor, and it's because Lithgow is now returned to take his revenge on him. Is pushing him really fast in his chair. This is a really interesting example of you got this kind of limited location, and they just make the most of it visually. It's really well directed.
Well, and I also like how they allow you to experience what somebody like Geoffrey Rush's character is experiencing when you're dealing with a stroke, because there's a lot of sequences, just like what Scott said, where he thinks one thing is happening and then he kind of, the camera pulls back and it's like, no, something else is happening here. I like how they distort the soundtrack sometimes on him.
Yeah, great
sound design. What he's hearing,
and
with some of the visuals and things where, he's really struggling trying to recover from this stroke effects.
Yeah, talk about sound. It's like some of the songs, it's like, where did they get these songs? Is they're like unique to New Zealand? So, I mean,
public domain, maybe?
Campy kind of music I've ever heard in my life. It's just like, and everyone like knows it. But then the antagonist, he uses these songs to torture the other people, And you bring up a good point with the stroke, and it kind of reinforces my opinion, I think, is that the Lithgow character is not really there because it's the effects of the stroke, the Geoffrey Rush's stroke, is that brings all this to fore, and it alters his reality, and so. But to regain his humanity, he has to fight it, and so he has a victory for a little bit. But the cat shows up, and we know.
I love the cat thing. That's a great
that was good. That was really good with the cat.
But I will say that if Lithgow is not there, why does he have asthma? Or why does he have any ailments if he's not real?
I can't explain it. But then again, it's like it's a movie maker. You put it out there, and you don't have to explain everything.
That's true, and I'm guilty of that for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm still going down the road that John Lithgow is there. I do appreciate that Gene has seen so many horror movies at this point that we can go down roads like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's
That's kind of a common conspiracy theory I've noticed in a lot of movies when fans look back on movies and say, well, does this character really exist? Which is compelling at times.
Yeah. But again, I think the movie doesn't work because movies lose it for me when things just don't happen and they should happen. With the security. I mean, nursing homes, convalescent homes, whatever you want to call it, they're always staffed. Even at night, they're staffed like crazy.
Because they're liable if someone gets hurt.
Huge liability. They would be shut down. And so people wandering down the hallways, going outside, they would find them. Absolutely, positively, every time. Yeah. So the way around that, though, it's not there.
No, he's there. But if you watch the film, leave us a comment. Lithgow's there or Lithgow's not there. Pretty sure you're going to go Lithgow's there. Anything else, Gene, to talk about with this one?
I just love also that going back to our English background is like he quotes a lot of literature. That just shows that he's the judge and he has memorized a lot of Hemingway, for example, and so that's good stuff. Yeah, so I appreciate that.
Scott, anything more?
I was going to make one more comment about John Lithgow, who I'm a big fan of, and he's great in this movie, as is Rush. But I noticed that they gave John Lithgow these kind of snaggly teeth to make him more fearsome, and they gave him like these freaky blue contacts because I think his eyes are blue, but they made him super intense ice blue. Yeah. So that was pretty interesting. I like, thinking on this movie how it is an unusual movie in an unusual setting as far as that goes. But it is, it's a bully movie, right? I mean, there's a bully to defeat. It's common in horror movies that you're either completely outmatched by the villain, whether it's aliens or whatever. How are you possibly going to defeat this force? And they do a good job at giving it and giving the heroes an impossible situation.
Well, and it's almost a reverse of every movie we've ever seen where no one believes the teens. No one's believing the old guy.
Yeah, that's true.
They're too old.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're full of dementia. They can't do anything.
Right.
Now, I would argue that maybe it's the head of the convalescence home is not real because she doesn't do her job.
Right.
Well.
Yeah, she doesn't. She just
believe anybody.
She's completely dismissive.
Check the cameras and nothing.
No.
So, and then she just vanishes completely. So maybe that's true.
But I like this movie because I think I've mentioned this before. I'm trying to write a screenplay for a horror movie. And I like their idea. It's because you can reduce costs a lot by keeping all the shots interior.
Have you seen my movie, Jane?
Yes, you keep it all localized. It's a way to reduce. Yeah. And this movie is very low on the special effects. So I appreciate that. It just has a good story. This movie moves and it works because of a great story.
All the money went into that huge baby head.
The baby head.
That one shot, one or two shots, that enormous Jane head.
The baby changes the expressions.
Well, and I just think too, when you have actors of the quality of Lithgow,
so good,
right?
Rush.
Yeah, it makes
it really. Every time Rush is on screen, you're focused on what he's doing. Every time Lithgow's on screen, you're focused on what he's doing.
Yeah, they own their scenes for sure.
Yeah, just a really great acting performance from both of them. Disappointing that this movie had probably one of the most limited theatrical runs you could run across and went straight to streaming. Certainly would recommend checking it out on any of your streaming platforms. It is, again, one of these horror movies that kind of is in a unique place where you haven't seen something like this before. Yes, we talked very briefly about Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which is also good.
This is better.
By far, of course. But again, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane had two high-quality actresses in that one at the time. And so you're much more engaged with this film, however, because of the setting of the convalescence home. And so it's just really a lot of stuff going on in here.
I have to bring up a topic, which is off topic. But it's kind of related to what you just said. It's like why this movie had such a limited theatrical run. Because every movie theater that's out there now is a multiplex, right? So, but I remember growing up, movies would have incredibly long runs. I remember Star Wars was at the Cooper Theater, which is a cinematic screen, for a long, almost a year. Yeah, and then Alien, which showed it there too. It's a really long runs, but that just doesn't exist anymore. And to me, it doesn't make sense because let's just give a movie like this a shot. Because if there are 16 screens, just put it on a screen 16 for a while and let it maybe find an audience. I mean, promote it. How difficult is that? Mm-hmm. In the age of, Instagram and multimedia, find a way to promote it. I mean, just get the word out there. I mean, people would go see it.
This is also a good example, I think, of how instead of making a giant, gargantuan tentpole movie, maybe make 10 short, 10 lower budget movies, that could, like this one, that could be amazing and earn their budget back easily.
Right, because I think this, again, movie didn't cost that much. I mean, how could it really? I mean, probably the major thing was paying those two
salaries,
stars. Yeah. And then if you give a movie like this a shot, and then, like you said, you have 10 more of them like that, in aggregate, it would make as much as your big, $200 million blockbuster, or even more.
Yeah, greed. Too much greed.
Well, there's
a different topic, but
right.
I wanted to throw it out
Gene
there.
and I have talked about this a billion times. As soon as the movie studios got taken over by people who are not filmmakers or have no real understanding
bean
of film,
counters,
you've lost a lot of quality product. And that's why we champion studios like A24 and Neon. This was IFC that brought this one to life. So these lower level studios, production companies, they're the ones that are keeping the true spirit of filmmaking alive.
All right.
Well, it's definitely a hidden gem, so you should seek it out.
Yeah,
it's good.
For sure.
Yeah.
Gene, what are we doing next week?
My older kid wants to see this movie that's in the movie theaters right now. It's slipping my mind. Sinners. Yes, thank you very much. He wants to see it. Yeah, so why don't we just watch Sinners?
Okay, we will give Sinners a try. If I can't make it to the theater, we'll have to do something else. But yeah, we'll go for that.
There's always something in the Laserdisc collection to watch.
Always is. We tried to fit Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and we ended up with Night of the Comet instead.
That's true.
But
probably my fault.
That's a tale for another time.
Whose movie was Night of the Comet? Was that your pick?
I'm blaming Scott on that one, actually. Because
you suggested it, and I said, I'll watch it. I'm an 80s kid.
Right, because I was like, we're doing Leatherface, and Tyken didn't want to do Leatherface, and then Scott was like thinking it's a slasher or something and not understanding that it's this commentary on the failings of the family structure. But we decided on Night of the Comet because Scott was like, well, Gene's not there. We can do some schlocky thing.
That's true. I did say that, yeah.
I won't lose my mind.
I almost wanted to pull out my Gene impression when I saw the movie, which was, I hate this movie. It's terrible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty much disliked by everybody except me, who thought it was great. Anyway, we will catch you next week, hopefully with Sinners. If not, it'll be something. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Bye.